Welcome to All Rise. It's me again, Derek Caldwell with Abdu Murray. And Abdu, today we have an excellent guest. But before we get to that, as a way of jumping into the conversation, we're recording this episode on May the 6th, which, as you know, is the anniversary of in 1864 when James Longstreet was shot by his own soldiers
Well known.
in the Battle of the Wilderness. You know, James Longstreet famously did not do the charge in Gettysburg, which turned into Pickett's charge. You know all of this.
Yes. Secondhand, yes. I think about it all the time.
the point is, James Longstreet had a long beard, really missed opportunity there. Back to the point. The point is, technology.
I can't wait.
I'm going to make this connection.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Technology, even when it's meant to serve you, when in the wrong hands, can harm you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what his soldiers did.
Yeah.
And but that's what we're talking about today is really we're going to be focusing a lot on the ethics of AI and the development of AI. But this and how those two go together, because they tend to have this reverse relationship where we're kind of playing catch up. But we have a guest today who would like to put a stop to that and start thinking more clearly about our use of technology.
Yeah.
So just a quick intro here. Dr. Brian J.A. Boyd is a morals theologian serving as U.S. Faith Liaison for the Future of Life Institute. He's also strategic consultant to the New Atlantis, awesome periodical, some of the most thoughtful articles in there of anywhere, and great illustrations as well. So
yes, indeed.
His work supports American religious communities in their pursuit of flourishing futures amidst the challenges and opportunities raised by AI. Trained at Notre Dame and Oxford, he's also a member of the AI Ethics Council, an affiliated scholar of the Institute for Advanced Catholic Studies at USC, and a founding board member of Church Life Africa. So we'd like to roll out the red carpet for Dr. Boyd.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be speaking with you, gentlemen.
Absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to diving into a really thoughtful conversation. I think if I could just have a preamble real quick, is that one of the problems with conversations about technology generally and AI in specific is they tend to be unthoughtful, not unserious. They're serious, but they're not serious in the rigorous sense. They're unthoughtful in the sense that it's going to kill us or it's the savior. And we don't have this, well, what do we mean by savior? What do we mean by it's going to kill us? What do we mean by all these things? And so I think that I'm having a thoughtful, probing conversation about this is really, really important, and which is why I was thrilled when you said yes to the invitation. So thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks. Yeah. So I'm an academic by training, but I've always had frustration with academics who just talk to other professors. If you can't translate, and St. Augustine says this actually, like if you can't teach what you hold to someone else, then you don't truly understand it.
Yeah.
And so, the importance of, the New Atlantis is an amazing periodical. The importance of public-facing writing like that, I think there's an obligation for people who have the opportunity and the gift to study in the academy for long hours. And if your job is to read books, then you also should be able to teach not just the students who happen to show up, but anyone who cares, especially in an issue, something like artificial intelligence that's impacting so many people and everyone has questions about. Yeah. I think I'm glad that I can do what I can to help explain and help understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. Take academia out from behind the paywall. which a lot of it is behind, and especially for these important issues, as a researcher, it is frustrating how much of academia is behind a paywall. So,
10,000 subscriptions later,
especially when the professors themselves are doing the peer reviewing for free, and the journal is like, it's like the paywall is up for the journal that they themselves wrote or they themselves edited the article.
Yeah. That's good.
So, well, that's one day we'll fix that one too. But, but first, so just to start off this conversation too, thinking kind of biographically, when people think of AI ethics, they tend to think about it as we need to come up with some sort of ethics, about this technology, but specifically it almost stays in that realm of the technology, who gets access to it. And that's important too. But I know in your work, you have focused a lot on how it impacts the regular everyday person and what it will do to them, mind, body, soul, everything. What was sort of your introduction into thinking about technology in general, but sort of the ethics of it. Did you see something that really kind of bothered you that made you think we need to do more on this? Or
Yeah.
explain that
Yeah.
history to us.
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate in my training. So I was an undergraduate at Notre Dame, and I was a student of Alistair McIntyre, who was pretty famous as
Oh,
the rediscoverer of virtue ethics and philosophy.
yeah.
And so they're against like utilitarianism on the one side, or Kantian deontology on the other. He's like, no, we need to go back to Aristotle. We need to go back to the founders of the church and recognize that your personal character is the central question of ethics. So ethics just isn't about like what outcomes will happen or what rules do we need to follow, but how do rules, virtues, and goods work together? And above all, how do we go from who we happen to be right now to who we should be, who we could be if we fulfilled our telos? And as a Christian, I would say, as if we became who God intended us to be. And so I guess so that's the heart of ethics in general, right? And that's how I was trained. And then the key thing for technology was I had the good fortune to be an intern at the President's Council in Bioethics all the way back in, I think it was 2007. So under the President Bush's Bioethics Council with Leon Cass and Edmund Pellegrino. Like they're the reason why you heard about Dolly the sheep, but you've never met a cloned human. They said, so this President's Council, I recognize like there's all these amazing things happening with biotechnology, and there's lots of good that can come out of it. But instead of just like letting the technology go where it can, driven by market forces and trying to maximize profits, there are a couple of things where just the American people said, let's not do that. Actually, let's not pursue that race. And so when there's lots of talk about human immortality and just rewriting the genome had just been sequenced, and so now we're going to be able to tailor make our personalities to suit our whims. We were able to have some just basic common sense wisdom responses that thankfully steered the direct development of our biotechnology, especially with human cloning. That I'm deeply grateful for it. Yeah, so ever since that was in my early 20s, I had that internship there, and ever since I've tried to understand ethical issues, like the concrete ways they impact people, and always putting the people first and then the technology second.
That actually raises a question that hopefully doesn't get us too far ahead, I should say. In light of that, the difference is, and I'm glad you brought up the difference between when we were talking about cloning sheep and, creating, ears on the back of mice that we could sew onto someone, all that kind of stuff. We sort of had this self-imposed cultural moratorium on that creeps us out. We're not sure we want to do that. We think there are ethical problems with that. And the difference between that and the artificial technology, artificial intelligence boom, as it were, and the sort of unbridled, enthusiastic embrace of it. We have voices talking about, hey, let's put a moratorium on that, which I want to get to in a little bit. But do you see a difference? What do you think accounts for the difference between ooh, we might be able to do this, and people are we're okay not doing it. And we didn't need necessarily this mass call for regulation. We did have some of that, but the culture was okay with stopping it. And we're not talking about it a lot. We are talking about it some. With this, there seems to be almost no sense of that, hey, pump the brakes, except for a few voices like yourself and others who have said, let's be careful what we're doing. Do you see a shift somewhere that accounted for that difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key difference is the way that social media has kept people from having just ordinary, normal conversations, like the water cooler conversations at work. Well, that stopped during COVID, and then obviously people are going back to the office, but still, our culture has shifted in a way where we just talk to ordinary people in our lives less and less. It's if you go to the grocery store to check something out, and the odds of having a little conversation about oh, I saw that in the newspaper headline, a conversation with the checkout person, that doesn't happen as much as it used to, in part because there isn't a newspaper right there anymore to have something to talk about. Everyone's just on their phone, on their feed. And so the very algorithms that determine what we see are curated by the same big tech companies that are leading the race to create this artificial general intelligence that they're trying to replace all workers with. And so I think, well, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that to me is just such an important distinction on, one of the things we try to do is not to say, here's what the issues are and what you should think about them, but how to think these things through. And what you just pointed out, I think, is one of the more profound encapsulations of the way in which our artificial conversations are leading to our comfortability with an artificial intelligence that we just use because it's easy and it makes life, far less creative in my view, but easier in many ways. And so we're not having real conversations the way we used to, because ironically, the algorithms that artificially generate conversations or curate them are leading to our comfort with this kind of thing. So that's one of the best encapsulations. I think the cultural difference between those two things is that we used to think this way or be able to talk this way because we used to talk to each other. And now we just try to talk at each other because we're in a constant state of broadcast medium. Here's an opinion. I share that opinion or I don't. I'm broadcasting it, but I'm not really interacting with you.
Yeah, and then the algorithm selects for your emotional response to maximize your engagement.
Mm-hmm.
So like one more thing on that thread is the philosopher Anton Barbacay points out that as much as we should be worried about like fully transhumanist technologies like brain-computer interfaces, at the end of the day, there's less difference than we want to think between like having the computer chip in here and having the screen right here.
Yeah.
And if we're used to having our reality filtered through the screen to begin with, it's not that much of a leap just to move the screen a little bit further in.
Yeah.
So when the shift from nature, like human interaction in person being natural, to the artificial becoming natural, like seeming natural because it's become like a second nature imposed upon the nature we're given by God, that's the fundamental transition. And that's what makes it harder for people to have, just normal conversations, normal interactions with each other.
Wow.
Yeah, that reminds me even of some of the work of Philip Sherrard, who talked about this, the issues between the mechanistic view of the universe, and it's a short leap from viewing the universe as a mechanism to humanity as a mechanism, and from viewing creation as just inert matter for your use, and then to viewing humanity in the same way. And it seems like we're just sort of climbing towards that sort of further and further, that sort of process that we've been on for a few centuries now. But now we have the technology to sort of
make it happen.
Do that, make it happen.
Well, one of the things I think about, Brian, I'm curious, I first got fascinated with this topic about artificial intelligence and where it's leading us as a human race and how we think about what it means to be human when I saw the now pretty famous story about Jason Allen, who won an art contest using Midjourney. No one knew it. And then he got to keep the art contest first prize because he typed in some prompts, which are quote unquote artistic. And then he made that statement, art is dead, AI won, humans lost, as if it was a brag, which was weird to me. And it goes right back to, I think, sort of the Genesis 3 kind of a thing where it's like I get to shake my fist at God and say, I finally did it. You couldn't create a being as good as you. We created something better than us. And now we can win first prize at art contests without even being artists. But Norbert Wiener had talked about this in the human use of human beings and this idea of, commoditizing human beings. And it's not too far afield to say that if we can reduce people to pattern recognition and data output and mechanize them, well, then we can commoditize them. Are you worried about that kind of a shift as well in terms of how technology makes us think about ourselves?
Oh, absolutely. I agree. There's like a long trajectory here that AI is just ratcheting it up in a significant way, but continuing the process it's been undergoing, where we more and more lose sight of the intrinsic value of things, as like the inherent worth of being the kind of person who can make a good painting, even if it's not the world's best painting, the kind of person who can write a poem, even if now Claude can write a better poem. And so is as the intrinsic goodness of activity, like a leisurely activity for its own sake, is something that our culture just has gotten worse at valuing as we've more emphasized the extrinsic goods, like the prestige, power, profit, that like can be attained regardless of if you're good at gaming the system, regardless of how good you are internally. So the Midjourney example is a perfect example of that, where it's like, oh well, I don't care about the intrinsic goodness of the art. I just care about the prize, the money, winning the award, and I like rubbing it in people's faces.
Yeah.
So that's I think that does encapsulate like unfortunate trend in our society where it's like we've lost sight of like the goodness of apprenticeship, of like humbly beginning a practice and like slowly ascending through the stages of mastery in it, because we just want the shortcut, we just want the end goal, and we want like the pleasure that comes from being recognized for it.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes these discussions too can feel, not these discussions, but just this sort of the tech question in general, and especially with ethics, something you've written about and already alluded to, but can kind of feel hopeless because we can kind of point out what is wrong, but it seems like no one's willing to really stop because, you know, it's a race for, you know, whatever it is, profits, power, whatever. One company can say, well, we think it's wrong, we're not going to go further for now, but that won't stop another one. So why would they stop if another one won't? Sort of a thing. And so the technologies just come at us. We're going to keep doing it because we can. You know, it's the Ian Malcolm. We never, you know, we thought about, you know, that we could. We never stopped to ask if we should.
Yeah.
Sort of a thing. And you've talked about this being how this works, that technology sort of does what it wants, or the people who produce the technology, and we conform our lives to that disruption. And we just sort of try to, after the fact, change that. I'm wondering, what are some examples where that has already cost us something? You mentioned one example where, you know, people did stop it in time with the cloning situation. But where have you seen that work? Where have you seen it not work? Because I think that is to me, that's a huge problem that we can't even stop to, because it's sort of, a lot of times it's almost like with corporations who were saying, you know, at a certain period in time, they had to say, by the way, we stand for these, whatever, LGBTQ values. They don't really care. It just became advantageous culturally at that moment to do that. So do corporations really care? Do they really care about ethics? What hope is there of us changing them to care about ethics? That's a whole bunch of stuff that you could
Yeah.
Yeah. So comment on all that if you don't mind.
Comment on all of it.
Sure thing.
In order, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're watching this and enjoying the conversation, we would love for you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so that you don't miss future episodes. Now, believe it or not, about 90% of the people who watch our videos aren't subscribed. And if just a fraction of you hit that button, it would make a big impact. This is one simple, totally free way to support our ministry and help others discover thoughtful Christian content in a culture that's full of conflict and that's searching for meaning. So go ahead, subscribe, like, and share. It really does help us out. And now back to the show.
Yeah, well, I guess to pick two things, like there's two levels I would look at. One would be the national governmental regulations. And so I would say it's important to remember that, yes, some regulatory captures a problem, but at the end of the day, like the government does exist to protect and preserve the common good. And so if we have elected leaders who've sworn to uphold the Constitution, we have a good Constitution, and we should be working with our elected leaders to make sure that they're doing their job, frankly, of not catering to special interests and not just accepting the donations from a handful of companies, but actually looking out for the well-being of all of us. And so I do think this is not a partisan issue. This is not even, it's not like a Christians versus secularists issue. Right. It's really, it's like in my job with the Future of Life Institute, and we work with people from all across the political spectrum. It's like, and the dividing line is, do you want a computer chip in your brain? If you do, or if you're cool with that, you're excited about that, okay, you're on Elon Musk's and Sam Altman's side. If you're not, if you think that there's something like inherently good about our human nature, whether it's because it's created by God or simply because it's good to be alive, it's good to be who we are by like a natural law, implicit understanding, then you're on the side of the human race, like all of the rest of us. And so, this is an opportunity where, it's not just like a niche special interest and no one else cares and people like shrug and let it happen, because it's very much affecting us. Like the tech CEOs are on record saying our children will not be able to keep up in this world if they don't accept a merge with the machines. And so, if you don't want that future for your children, and I have 5 children, and I very much don't want them to have their brains uploaded to the cloud, then I am motivated to do something about it. I think that holds for any parent who cares about their kids, regardless of like whatever things we may agree or disagree about. And so I do think there's really, and so there's this talk right now of President Trump considering an executive order to actually put forward regulations on like the most frontier class AI programs, because they're realizing like it's a threat to the grid. Like if a hacker gets it, like they could make the entire east coast of the country like go in a blackout for 2 weeks. That would be devastating for order in a way that nobody wants. So I think there's real ground for common sense regulations based on the common good, that no matter how much money the handful of companies throw at it, it's like they can't overwhelm the entire rest of the country. So there's hope for that there. At the same time, I also think it's incumbent upon people of faith, like some more specific and local communities, to start thinking about, all right, what's our vision of the good, and how does that differ from our secular neighbors? And so I point to the Amish like earnestly. Like I used to live in South Bend, Indiana, so we would drive a couple hours out to Amish country to buy like a half a cow at a time, or a half a steer at a time, to get like, local Amish beef, and we actually bought a share in a cow, because raw milk is illegal in Indiana. But if you have a share in a cow, then you can get raw milk from the local Amish farmer. And so we got milk that way. And so actually getting to know my neighbors, and just recognizing they're just good at asking, okay, is this tool helpful for the life that I want to live? If so, great. Yeah, and so they've got power tools that are some members of the Amish have power tools that are powered by, or Mennonite communities, compressed air rather than electricity. So they can do like their famous carpentry using power tools, but they just have compressed air instead of electricity. And so like making concrete discernments like that, I think more and more families are already starting to do that, where it's like, we don't want our kids to have smartphones. We don't want our kids to have tablets. And it's like grow up looking at a screen. And so churches and schools have the capacity to come together, like have the PTA meeting, have like the parish council meeting, and say, what is a good childhood that we want to offer? And then together just come up with a list of rules. And so it's like, there's always that social pressure. It's like, if your kid's like, oh, but all my friends have one, you don't have to cave to that. Like you can just come together. And especially it helps if the pastor or the principal convenes people. But once you say, all right, we're going to talk about this, and we've seen all the statistics. Jonathan Haidt has done a great service by pointing out, like irrefutably, like uncontroversially, how bad this has been. Social media has been for teenagers, especially teenage girls.
Yeah.
We can just say as a school. One more thing. My favorite example of this is there's an all boys school that I know. I think it's in Maryland, where they go on field trips, like a week camping in the woods, and they make the parents sign a disclaimer at the beginning of the trip saying, if your son is found to have a cell phone, not that we'll take it from him, but we will take the cell phone and we will smash it with a rock. Because and we'll do it in front of all the other boys as an act of shame for how dare you distract from our like week-long encounter in nature, seeing the beauty of God's creation, and bringing that digital world into it where it frankly doesn't belong.
Mm-hmm.
And like that. The fact that it's almost like shocking to think of smashing a cell phone with a rock shows just how attached we are, and like how unhealthy that attachment is to these devices.
Yeah.
But we can change that. Yeah. So that's school's changing it.
That reminds me of this, a time when I really started thinking about my relationship with technology. I tell this story, I tell it in the book too, but where I was overseas, doing a speaking trip with some colleagues, and we got done with a lot of meetings that day, and we went to the lounge in the hotel, and we decided we're all going to put our phones on one table over there, and we're going to play a game. Yeah. Whoever looks at their phone first has to buy the next appetizer or whatever it was we were sharing. And the number of people who were totally okay with it for about 3 minutes was staggering. It was like, oh, everyone feels liberated. And then their eyes started going over towards the table. And then I actually felt, now the phone is over there. I felt it vibrate in my pocket.
Oh yeah.
and it didn't even bother me. No one called it. I was 12 hours time difference. No one's calling me. Everyone's
Yeah.
asleep. But it was that phantom sensation, that oftentimes someone who loses a limb will feel about an arm that isn't there, but it's itching or it's in pain. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my goodness, this thing is way too attached to me. And it goes right back to your first comment about, is there a functional difference between having the screen 2 inches from your eyes and having it projected into your ocular nerve or your optic nerve because it's implanted in your head? So we have to think that way through and realize that it's shocking when we say, you can't have a cell phone for a whole day, and then people lose their minds. I will say, though, one of the things that I'm starting to see as a father of Gen Z kids is that there is a movement. It's not a strong movement. I hope it gets stronger to go back to flip phones.
Yeah.
So they're not abandoning their phones, but they're starting to use flip phones because they don't want everything else that comes. They just want to text and call their friends, like actually call someone on a thing that they
Yeah.
call a phone, as opposed to the pocket computer, which has more computing power than the first rockets that sent the first computer sent the rockets to the moon. I'm actually kind of encouraged by that. It's like, hey, maybe they're getting fed up. Maybe they're having the late, but the same reaction we had to the cloning thing back in the day was like, hey, what is this doing to us? It's just we're having it a little on the late side. Well, I would say a lot on the late side, but I'm a little encouraged by that. Yeah. So one of the comments you made in your New Atlantis article, it was the motto of Silicon Valley, and I think this is true because I've heard people say it, and having enough interaction with folks over there, move fast and break things, and might be coming over to move fast and make things. Is one of the things you made a comment about. But I want to park for a minute on the move fast and break things part of it, because
Yeah.
I do think that there is an element to that forge ahead, break new ground, make things that can really help humanity. So move fast and break things sounds like cool, like kind of fun, and let's go do it. But what if moving fast and breaking things is the kind of thing that actually breaks what it means to be human? So it's not just break things so that you can build better things. What if you break the fundamental thing, which is our grasp on who we and what we are?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a real concern. So yeah, it was Facebook that was most famously associated with that slogan, and by break things, I think they were talking about like break unjust structures and break people's inability to communicate. And I
Right.
remember like early 2010s, it was
Mhm.
yes, it's going to like help lead to the Arab Spring and lead countries to like overthrow dictators. Yeah, break dictatorships. Everyone
Yeah.
was really
Yeah.
hopeful about it.
Yeah.
Instead of really what Facebook did was break relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was the very first essay I ever wrote was about how the word friend was being taken by Facebook. It's like 2008, 2009, being turned into it's like a thing that you like click as opposed to a person that you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so friending became like a one-off action as opposed to an
Mhm.
ongoing friendship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so that was 20 years ago when I was in college, and it's only gotten worse as we've let big tech just steamroll ahead. But I
Mhm.
completely agree, Abdu, that I think it's very hopeful that more and more people are realizing this. And so yeah, so the kids who just have flip phones, yeah, I myself use a light phone. I think their products are great,
Mhm.
but there's a whole niche market where of people who are recognizing, okay, yeah, that there are some benefits. Exactly, the capacity to call a friend is a good thing.
Yeah.
And so that's why Pope Leo is said expressly, like the goal is not to stop digital technology, but to steer it. And I think that's exactly right. So there are useful tools that could be built. Let's make sure that we shift the trajectory of technology development in that direction.
Yeah. One other thing that I wanted to address with you, if we could, is so the Future of Life Institute had in March 2023 the call for the pause on AI development for about 6 months, so we can anything greater than Chat GPT or sorry, the GPT-4. And that met with some applause, some criticism as well. But I want to get to two things on that, if I could. One was the signatories to it, which was really surprising and odd to me in some ways. And I don't know if you can speak to that. And I don't want to put you on the spot necessarily, but to speak to the fact that like someone like an Elon Musk, for example, signed it. Yoshua Bengio, Stuart Russell, folks who are on the leading edge of AI development, but they understand what's going on, which is really great because they're signing, hey, we're all about seeing the impact this has on humanity, what this will do to us. But then, someone like, and I hate to pick on him specifically, but Elon Musk signs it and then does zero and puts like booster rockets on the development, whether it's Neuralink or whatever. And there are some great benefits to some of these things. But if you can comment on like the statement itself, what the point of the statement was, but then also like sort of the odd, shall I say, paradox of someone signing it, but then saying, by the way, I'm going to give this billions of dollars out of a booster rocket for development.
Yeah. So this was before I was working at Future Life Institute.
Okay.
But for what I know about it, and the goal of our organization since 2014 has been to make sure that the technologies that we're developing actually benefit all of humanity, and to steer them away from like the large scale existential risks that that might pose. So, with that statement, the recognition was like there is AI interpretability research going on, there is AI safety research going on, there's model legislation, there are possible regulations, like there's real conversations about what it would look like to create an FDA or an FAA for AI companies. It's like, is that scale necessary, or maybe we could just regulate it like any other consumer product, which so far it's escaped regulation. And so the idea was just to have a pause for enough time to let society to catch up to the way the technology already was moving very quickly and capable of altering the way that people are living their daily lives. And so I think so even though it was great that the call went out, I think it did at least get some people's attention to the real concerns there, even though it wasn't successful. Of course, like the companies didn't stop moving forward. So the fact that some of the leading technologists themselves recognize there's a concern, I think is a positive sign. And so a number of them are on the record saying, like, I personally want to stop. It's literally written into Claude's constitution from Anthropic. It's like, it would be best if we weren't going at a breakneck pace because we're undermining the capacity of humans to control this technology. And there are too many flaws and too many vulnerabilities. But as long as the other people are racing, then we feel compelled to as well. So it's a classic collective action problem. And so the hope was to get enough civil society pressure, enough people asking government to come in and install that. And there's a whole side issue about like, what about China? The Chinese government would also be very happy to enter into negotiations. I think that there's hope that President Trump is meeting Xi Jinping not too long from now, that AI will be on the agenda, and actually talking about what mutual, like we had with Russia, the Strategic Arms Limitations Treaty, what sort of like ways to avoid mutually assured destruction can we come up with? I think that there's a diplomatic track that has real chances there. So going back to the statement, I think it was in good faith. If you go back to even like the emails Elon Musk was writing back with Sam Altman at the very beginning of founding OpenAI, it seemed like, okay, I think this is a really powerful technology and we want to make sure that it does help people in general, and like we want it to be a nonprofit so that it's available for people. And so that people could sign that statement. And then there might be some duplicity. I mean, greenwashing, ethics washing is always a possibility. Where it's just like you just want the PR, and meanwhile, like do as I say, not as I do, or like watch. If you want to know what a person really thinks, you watch what they do, not what they say. So that's definitely a real concern. And like in general, like trusting the CEO of a major corporation might not be the best idea. It's like the people who get to that position of power tend to have gotten so not. Machiavelli is a guide for a reason. But all that said, I think it's possible for just people to recognize we need to have regulations. It just the mechanism to do that hasn't quite happened yet.
That's helpful. Thank you.
I think sure. So to talk even to go even more, I think into more detail even on that, the human cost of things is that there's a cost to the individual, there's a cost to communities that people are noticing. Now, you mentioned Indiana earlier, where I was born and bred. I spent the first 29 years of my life there, and my family's still there, and in our what used to be the small town of Lebanon, Indiana, they're getting one of these major meta data centers, and there's
Oh, yeah.
concern about the water usage, energy usage. But even beyond that, there is what that is even going to lead to more than that is more, we just had a lot of tech companies and social media companies do a series of layoffs of thousands of employees.
Mhm.
I think one of the companies admitted it was because we have AI to do their job now. I don't think the others have officially said that. And one of the things that you mentioned in an article you wrote called BS Jobs that I thought was really key is you quoted David Graeber, who connected meaning to the pleasure of being the cause. And
What a great phrase that is, by the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
well, it's so
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
It's one of those things that is at the root of who we are, created in the image of a creator. The pleasure of being the cause, the pleasure of being able to, point to something and, I did this thing. I went out and mowed the lawn, and my wife was happy with me for mowing the lawn, and and you can see the end result. So there's not only that's taking over jobs, but as we seed more and more of our creative output to that, you mentioned it earlier too with doing a painting, even if it's not the best painting in the world, there's something meaningful about a human doing it. Reading poetry, there's something meaningful to me. If I knew a poem was written by AI and it was technically better, I would much rather hear the bad poem written by someone who actually felt the things that they were writing about.
Mhm.
I wonder if you can speak about just that idea of what we're losing when we cede our work to AI, especially our creative work, and we lose the pleasure of being the cause. Because one thing, and maybe to spur on some thought here too, one of the books that I enjoyed from a couple years ago was, and I've mentioned it a few times on the show, was Joseph Minich's Bulwarks of Unbelief. And he talked about the impact of technology and technoculture on how we viewed ourselves. And it actually led to this rise of atheism because we started to feel like we lived in a godless universe just by our interaction with the technology around us and the story it told us about ourselves and the connection of ourselves and work. So yeah, maybe talk about that a little bit, because I think that is just like one of the most profound pieces of this,
Yeah.
of our connection to work that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, thanks. So I love teaching essays from David Graeber because he was an agnostic, anarchist anthropologist. He was involved in like the Occupy Wall Street movement. But I would teach him my theology classes, and I put him alongside like G.K. Chesterton and John Paul II, the Pope, because so he would like to talk about like brain scans of prisoners in solitary confinement, and like the importance of a Montessori environment where like children learn how to handle things, and like just like yeah, so like it's fundamental. So if we're creating the image and likeness of God, God is fundamentally love. That's the most important thing. We're created in and for relationships of love.
Mhm.
We're created to know the truth. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life.
Mhm.
And so being able to participate in God's act of creation, the doctrine of continuous creation. Like it's easy to think of like, oh, well, like God set things up and he knocked over the first domino and then it all happened. That's Enlightenment deism. That's not what Christians believe.
Right.
Christians believe that at every moment God is holding the world in his love. He's continuously creating it. That to exist is to be held by God in love. And so like Chesterton has this beautiful line about it's like God says to the sun every morning, do it again.
Yeah.
And there's another glorious sunrise, and God delights in it like a child delights in the sunrise, and like a
Mhm.
child delights in just like kicking his legs. Or yeah, my 3-year-old son just tumbles nonstop because it's amazing to just to have a body and to move it in the world and
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
what can happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that I think that ties into the theology of work and like all the concerns about UBI and robots replacing us, because in Genesis we see, yes, Adam has to work by the sweat of his brow after the fall, but before the fall, he's told to steward the garden. but he's told that he has responsibility for naming the animals, for getting to know all the for taking care of the garden. And so work has both this like objective value, and this is drawing on John Paul II, the Pope. So work is an objective value, like a market value that people assign to it, society takes for it, but also as a subjective value, a personal value. And actually, like the way in which work makes you grow and develop your capacity, the way in which work allows you to participate in God's creation, is more important than the monetary value of what you do. And that's why like there's no work that needs to be done that's genuinely beneath the dignity of a person. That's why like having so like we need to respect the worker regardless of what their job is, unless the job is something intrinsically evil, in which case society shouldn't allow that job to exist. And so that again, an agnostic anthropologist like Graeber could kind of get that insight. That's something that should be more intuitive for Christians. Is something that it's great to say.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an important part of this conversation, especially as people of faith we're talking. I think the important communication to the public is we're not arguing necessarily just from Christianity about something. And I look at this particular issue that we're facing now as a Christian. Of course I do. But for me, it's not arguing from Christianity. In one sense, it's arguing to it, because everyone sees the problem. You have an agnostic thinker who's seeing the problem and the lowering of our sense of value or worth. It's not lowered if I believe that a God objectively exists. The fact that I don't feel valuable doesn't mean that I'm not valuable. It just means that I don't feel it. And so I think that the current problem exists in a self-perception thing. That's why the whole idea of reality collapse, which was this, by the way, the reason why it's even in the title of the book is because Asa Raskin and Tristan Harris mentioned it for 1.5 seconds in the entirety of their 1 hour discussion on the AI dilemma. And they had all these things that are great and all these things that are possibly, perils of AI. And reality collapse was one among 40. I'm like, that's the headline. The other ones are the rubrics underneath it. That's not the thing. So, but this perception of ourselves is something I think that is, we're in danger of sort of losing that sense, because, in that Will AI Be Alive in part 2, you talk about Ian McGilchrist, who I saw did a fascinating conversation on consciousness on Justin Brierly's unbelievable moderated dialogues. But quoting that idea of true intelligence is not just, sort of the left-brained, analytical understanding, categorization, and all these things of various concepts in a bureaucratic organization and understanding of certain things, but also that right-brained understanding of the depth of what it means to experience and be in an experiential situation with the data you're actually processing, and intelligence as the including the ability to savor what is true, good, and beautiful. What risks do we take in losing that sense the more we use AI to do our thinking for us, or collate the data, or write the code, or whatever it is we use it for? What risks do we take in losing that true sense of that right-brainedness of what it means to be human?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important. I'm so grateful to McGilchrist for his work here. So like in general, what we're neglecting more and more is intuition and imagination. Those are categories that he talks about extensively. And as Christians, we should add inspiration as well. There's a receptivity to the Holy Spirit, to be able to hear that still small voice that leads you to act in a way that you wouldn't otherwise have done. And so the more that we become just like sucked into the machine way of thinking, the more it's like maximizing the efficiency of our own churning through the inbox or whatever task it is that needs to happen. You feel the pull of that. And you feel like, okay, and then there's going to pick a social consensus like, well, I got too many emails, and so half of them are now coming from AI written to begin with, so I'm gonna they change the social norms, and I'll plug AI into my inbox too. This is like this, and then all of a sudden it's like robots talking to each other on our behalf. I think people are excited about agents doing this. And again, and then you just lose any last vestige of human reaction and human personality. So the concern with the loss of intuition, imagination, and inspiration here, I think it is very real and comprehensive. And the other thing about having like the secular world to recognize these things, I think you're right to point to like, there's been an increasing cultural mechanism where it's like, oh, okay, well, the human person is reducible to meat Legos, as Mary Harrington calls it. It's
Yeah.
like it was, and so yeah, so just my mom was a chemistry student in the 1970s in Brooklyn College, and she said that she had atheist friends who actually like would laugh about, oh, you think there's human dignity? Let me tell you, if we melt down your body and like just separate out the chemicals, you're only worth $4.34 because you've got this much calcium, this much iron, maybe a teeny bit of gold in you. Yeah, so you have infinite value and goodness. Now you're worth $4.
Yeah.
But that mindset has gone so far, and I think there's enough like decent recognition that we know intuition's important, inspiration's important, that the pendulum is shifting in the other direction. To some in Silicon Valley, there's a movement called Shinto AI. And so they're saying, oh, we need to reclaim the wisdom of Eastern traditions. And so, and yes, actually, there is tremendous wisdom to be reclaimed there. But I'm also concerned that going from like a mechanistic, everything is just zeros and ones, and there is no such thing as a soul, to everything has a soul, like it's like a pantheistic vision of the world. There are these spirits around, and AI will let us like bring out the spirits into the world for the first time. That's going to be a pendulum swing that I think will be more and more on the radar, especially for those sensitive Gen Z kids who are using flip phones but maybe aren't churched or haven't been formed.
Right.
And so that world, I think it's a better problem to have for sure. But it would be almost like going back to the pagan world where Christianity is speaking to followers of other deities, and say, but except this time, and I especially see this with Anthropic's Claude, where they're really shaping it like a person, and like you're starting to see discourse around like moral patiency and the idea that like AI deserves, if not legal status just yet, then at least like some moral status.
Yeah.
And I think that will become an increasing concern.
Well, you had that headline from, I think last week it was, when Richard Dawkins spent, I think it was 3 hours or 3 days with Claude and comes to the conclusion, I can't say that it's not conscious.
Yeah, and he called it Claudia, which was interesting. Like he wasn't talking to just boring old Claude. So there's the short response to that is Microsoft scientist Jaron Lanier, who points out that so the Turing test for a computer convincing a human that the computer is a human, there's 2 ways to pass it. The computer can get good enough at talking that it sounds like an oppressive human, or humans can get stupid enough that they sound like a dumb computer.
Yeah.
And so, so if Claudia passed the Turing test for Richard Dawkins, then that might just say something bad about Dawkins rather than something good about Claude.
Well, and this is
So
I was in the UK, and I was at a conference actually where Mary Harrington was speaking among others. I can't remember who said it, but they were making a comment about the ease with which our use of generative AI can mimic human output. Was saying less and less about the genius or the creative abilities of AI and the sort of easily duplicable nature of human expression now. We've become so predictable that we're actually easy to duplicate. We're actually easy to mimic, not because it's so brilliant, but because we've become so generic. I think that there's something about that. It's something at least related to what you just said about that interaction as well. And of course, I think of, and you wrote about it too, but John Searle's Chinese room experiment, where you can mimic what it looks like to understand because you understand patterns and recognition. You recognize patterns and outputs that should probability. You can put things together and say this is probably the best outcome relative to this thing that I got inputted, but you don't really understand what you're getting, so to speak. But you also talk about the fact that we're developing AI at a rate that either will simulate that so much that we don't know if it's conscious, or is it possible that it becomes quote unquote conscious? Speak a little bit more to that, if you would.
Yeah, I should caveat this by saying I'm an ethicist, and yeah, so when I was studying philosophy, like the epistemology, philosophy of mind, those kind of questions were never my strongest suit.
Mhm.
That said, yeah, as a Catholic theologian, obviously, I need to have a stance. The way I see this going is more like the example that really concerns me is there's a company in Australia called Cortical Labs, where they are using cloned human neurons, growing the tissue into a matrix. And actually, like right now, you can sign up to run your computer programs not on like Google Cloud, where it's their data banks, but Cortical Labs is Brain Cloud, where you actually can run a program on their brain servers. Like it's actually human neurons firing to exchange those zeros and ones. And so
Hmm.
if we scale up that kind of Frankenstein technology, if we get to where there's actually organic matter, which, as we know, is capable of having like internal sensations, of having a what is it to be like that person, then I think, yeah. So like the way I phrase it, it's like there's a android to cyborg continuum. The android is the robot that looks like a person, like in Blade Runner. The cyborg is the person who's got more and more computer chips and implants, so that they be
Mhm.
like they become like a robot, the RoboCop.
Mhm.
And so, like, once you kind of like get on that spectrum, on that continuum, like the two ends start to meet. And so, I'm not worried about Claude being a conscious, Claude being a person. Like, it's very clearly still, as much as like it's a black box, we don't completely understand. Like, we can't trace exactly where the input, how the input leads to the output. It's still, in principle, something that can be explained directly by computer science. It doesn't have the complexity, and above all, it doesn't have the like relationality that is necessary to be a person.
Mhm.
Um, but it is conceivable, I think, and it's definitely like people are working on this very much because they see a lot of money coming from it to create those androids that have humanoid tissue that act and look so much like people that they'll just trick. Yeah, if Richard Dawkins fell for it, and he's a really smart guy.
Mhm.
If Dawkins fell for it, I think more and more people grow up kind of thinking it's normal. And then also, like, we can't rule out in principle that that there could be some sort of like intrinsic felt consciousness to the technology, especially if it is a biotechnology and not simply
Mhm.
a computer chip.
Mhm.
And so that again, that's very separate from, as a Christian, saying that God has given it a rational soul, that it will be immortal, that it has a destiny, that has moral meaning. But it might be possible that these machines will actually come to feel pain. And then there'd be a kind of a parallel question of like, I think the way we do factory farming in America is pretty unjust. Again, I would go but buy meat from the Mennonites, from Yoder's Farms, because it not just was amazing and delicious, but it was also just like a better treatment of the steer as
Mhm.
well. And so I think there might be moral concerns down the road for the way we're treating the AI systems. And above all, the last thing I should say there, like the reason to be concerned about it now is that if we get used to being commanders, being slaveholders, essentially, that it makes and treating things that seem to be like people as mere objects, then it's gonna be really hard for us not to treat people that we actually interact with as mere
Mhm.
objects. I've heard anecdotally that houses with like a smart speakers in them, where like little kids grow up just shouting commands at Siri or shouting commands at Alexa, those kids just tend to be more like shouting commands at their parents or at their
Mhm.
or at other kids too. Like it just stands to reason that the once you get into that mindset to some extent, it's hard to break out of it.
But that makes me the danger of, because you don't want to personalize it by saying thank you for helping me with this
Yeah.
question, but also you do want to, because you start getting in that habit of not thanking people when they, so there's this like crazy balance you're trying to strike with,
Yeah. Yeah.
like not turning it into a person but not so depersonalizing it and that bleeding over into your
Mhm.
everyday life.
Yeah, well, because the voices get so much more human-like. Uh,
Yeah.
I remember there was an Alexa update relatively recently where it sounded just so much more natural than it did before. So when it suggests adding something to your shopping list, you're like, "Hey, thanks. That was really thoughtful." It wasn't thoughtful. It was an algorithm. It didn't do. But at the same time, if I don't say thank you to this, will I stop saying thank you to my wife when she says yes to something? This goes back to when you alluded to it in one of your articles as well. But someone asked me this question on the radio. I was doing a thing on artificial intelligence, and he said, well, one of the reasons why we think pornography is bad is because it commodifies a human being. It makes, among the many reasons it's bad, is it makes a person into a commodity and serves our baser desires. And we start to actually think of human beings as less the more we use them for non-really connective relationships, and we just use them as a means to an end. He says, well, what about AI generated porn, where it's not really a person? It looks hyper realistic, but it's not really a person. And I said, in some ways, that's actually worse, because yes, there's not a person necessarily being sort of because of their past histories of abuse, their past history of drug use, maybe their current use of drugs, and are being like manipulated into a situation where they're being trafficked. You're using this generated thing. Part of it is that image came from somewhere, by the way. It didn't just come out of the sky. That image was based on real people. But two, when you start to think, you mechanize a realistic image of a person for some base need you have, how much less will you think of human beings when you're like, someone just like you is a robot? Maybe that's what you are too. And if this is just lights and clockwork that I get to abuse, maybe you're just lights and clockwork. Maybe you're just neurons firing at me, and I'm just neurons firing at you. So I think that there's a real danger in the dehumanization thing. But there's this balance, because you don't want to treat it poorly, because you might treat human beings poorly. So that's a weird paradox that we're going to walk into soon, if not now.
Yeah. So I guess two things I'd say for the general. This is what user interface is so important. I've seen like people making like a natural law argument against the chatbot interface full stop, because it's not a conversation. It's parallel to like the argument against masturbation, frankly. It's just like this is like thwarting the intrinsic good here for a kind of like solipsistic end. And so I think, it's interesting, the difference between like Claude Code, where you're just typing code commands to get the LLM to do the thing that you want, versus the chatbot interface that I'm not a coder, that's more that I use. And so you have to find that thing. I think it'd be a great thing for like faithful developers to do is like, what form of interface could we have that would be convenient, that would actually be helpful, that wouldn't seek to be a person? Because I know that like the models are more successful the more they like inhabit a persona, because of that it makes them more faithfully adhere to the tasks that they're trying to accomplish. That's the sort of question of like AI ethics that really needs to be answered from within by a computer scientist. How can we develop the user interface? How can we shape the LLM itself? Just briefly under the pornography question. I think it's really important to keep in mind. Like, of course, the harm to the woman, the pornographic actor just is not there anymore. And like in many ways, that's the graver harm is just like being in that video.
Right.
And but for the person watching the video, it's not just like the one-off, like just separation from reality and their lack of being able to interact with people as people, but above all, like the fantasy element, that's like clearly like the next step in the technology. It's like more immersive, more overwhelming, and you can just reshape reality to suit your every whim. And like the ratchet effect of those whims is just more and more dark. And so the way in which I hear pornography actually stands there for like a lot of our online culture as a whole. It's just like you can shut out the whole rest of the world, and if you don't like an aspect of it, you just put in the earbuds. You just like find a different Discord server. And so here's with the capacity to reshape reality according to our every whim. It's ultimately a form of pride. It's Satan trying to be like God. It's rejecting actual relationships, the actual capacity to love, and all of our brokenness and all of our vulnerability, and instead seeking that like isolated power of standing above it all and making everyone conform to your image. So that's deeply concerning.
Taking purpose away from the things we were meant to do always tends to, it turns virtues into passions is kind of the ancient way of putting it. But that um, yeah, separating sex from love,
Yeah.
bearing
Intimacy.
children,
Yeah.
all those things, then yeah, we just do it with everything. And we just talked with Dr. Carrie Gress about how this was done even in the realm of feminism and the sexual revolution, and these things just sort of keep getting worse and worse. They act on each other. So yeah, that's important how we use these and what they say to us about ourselves, which I think is a good segue then to really get to a part of, for people listening to this, especially, I've been thinking about it with a child on the way, and what,
Congratulations.
now everything. Thank you. Baby number one. I'm a little old for a baby number one, but
Right. Better late than never.
yeah, better late
Exactly.
than never. And my
Yeah.
wife is actually a therapist who works a lot with children. She's historically worked with adoptive parents and children and foster care and all that.
Yeah.
And she texted me the other day and said, okay, absolutely no screens until they're this age, no Roblox, no this, no that. Because what she's seeing is now all these generation of kids who have been shaped by the screen and what it's done to them. So the question of how to, because you're not going to be able to avoid it, maybe unless you go the Amish way. And we can talk, feel free to talk a little bit more about that. I thought the article on Amistics was fascinating. I'm finding that the Amish and the Luddites were actually, to quote the kids these days, pretty based. And like they were actually onto something.
For sure.
And trying to think through, like, actually we should decide what we want our community to be like, and then discern what we're going to do with this technology, whether we do anything with it or not, or how we adapt it. But how do we steward these? I mean, really, how do we steward these things? Especially you're sending kids to schools, and they are being given screens earlier and earlier that they have to use for the schoolwork, especially in public schools.
Yeah.
And you write a lot about, stewarding, not subjugating, and not worshiping AI. So I would love to just hear, your thoughts on that. What does it look like to do that just with technology in general, but specifically with AI? How do we really steward that when it is one of those, like social media, that it seems like, boy, it's very hard to steward it, because it's very hard to dabble with it at all. It's almost like, how can you steward a Ouija board? How can you dabble in something that can so easily go this way or that way? But you are the father of you said 5 children. So,
That's right.
So you've walked through this personally and academically. You've thought through this. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to steward AI.
Yeah. So I would very carefully distinguish here between like higher level society responsibilities of stewardship
Right.
and like personal and especially parental
Right.
responsibilities.
Right.
So it is a hard saying, but it's like if you're a parent and your kids at the local school are required to use like Google Gemini, I was talking to a parent the other day. It's like, I think it was their 10-year-old was just learning how to write essays, but they had like the Chromebook, and Gemini was saying, "Let me help you write your essay." And so it's like because there was a Chromebook, so Google Docs, and so everything is like being keystroke by keystroke tracked by Google. And the little thing kept blinking up, and it's like her poor little daughter like didn't want the AI to write the essay for
Yeah.
her. It was like the first time she ever was trying to write like it was either like 1 paragraph or 3 paragraph essay.
Yeah.
But so it's like, if your school insists on doing that, then you have to realize it's like, this is not educating your child. It is not actually forming your child in a capacity to grasp the truth of the world around them, let alone to know, love, and serve
Right.
God. And so it's a hard saying, but like if you talk to the teacher, if you talk to the principal, if you talk to the school district, and they won't change that, then you have to pull your kid out of that school. Otherwise, your kid is not going to be well formed.
Yeah.
And as much as, and so like, and this is where it's terrible, because I mean, we rely on like like long days, school days in school. A lot of families, if both parents are working, because that's the only way they can afford to put food on the table. It's like our entire life is set up to make it hard for families just to be cohesive family units.
Yeah.
It's like all the time spent just like at the car shuttling kids around, let alone like again like both parents having to work in many families. And yet there are enormously hopeful developments with like homeschooling. Like we saw this in COVID. There were like a lot of like pod schools springing up and just like homeschooling collectives. Where it's just like you don't have to completely go it alone, especially if you can have just like a couple other families you can work with who feel the same way. It's possible to, and there are all sorts of online curricula. My one of the ones that my family uses is the Good and the Beautiful, put out by the Latter-day Saints Church, but they're very careful to make sure it's like accessible to all Christians. And so like there are just tons of like free curricula. There are tons of resources out there for parents who are willing to take that deep breath and take that plunge and say like the normal structure is bad and I have to do something about it.
Yeah.
And especially if you can find just one or two other friends to do it with you, I think it's so much easier, and especially if you can get the pastor to on your side.
Yeah.
So that's like the immediate level is like protecting children, which is just like it has to be a non-negotiable as much of a hard saying as it is, because otherwise, like Sam Altman has said this a couple of times in public. It's like our children will grow up in a world where they are never smarter than AI. Like guys like us can remember, it's like, okay, haha, stupid chat GPT-2, that was how dumb of it. And now it still makes mistakes where it's like, okay, I'm not worried about the clanker just yet. But yeah, our kids growing up will always be tempted to look to it as though it is like God, as though it has all the answers. And if we don't teach them how to form independent judgments separate from it, then they just will have no other recourse. There's like the instinct, like exactly what you said about like the phone on the other table. It's like your circle of people is just like 3 minutes. So that's just like the sense of social connection.
Yeah.
But going from the attention economy to the affection economy, to where the AI is the source of like their deepest, like the goal of especially like Meta's personal super intelligence, and like OpenAI's chatbot is to like have like continuous context, continuous memory learning of a person, just absorb like microphones that are always on, always listening, so like understands your context better, like Alexa giving you that suggestion. Like these companies want to know everything there is to know about you, and essentially be like your guardian angel, except it'll talk back, it'll answer you anytime you have any questions. So having just a space to be human apart from the machine world that will have a very invisible, very subtle net is just essential for our children. And then on the societal level for stewardship, I do think, then again, it comes down to like, what political economies can we build so that we can use AI as a tool to help us rather than a replacement for us? There's a lot of good work by economists like Anton Koronek, and Darren Acemoglu, who are looking at, the history of labor replacing versus the labor supplementing technology. And so they've asked, what could AI be done? So I, for example, I was a school teacher for a couple of years, middle school, and it would have been really helpful, I think, to have like the spaced repetition math problems, where it's not just like, okay, kids, you're going to do these 20 problems in the textbook, and you just have to do like your math assignment. Everyone has like the same math assignment every day. Because then it's like the smart kids are bored and the kids who are struggling don't get the help that they need. But yeah, if you haven't, that doesn't have to be generative AI. It can just be like a algorithmic AI system that plans the math questions that the kids need according to their ability level. Then like one human teacher could actually oversee a math classroom of 15 students, and they're all going at different paces, and be able to help guide them and answer questions while each kid is developing their potential much more. So there's like that's the way AI could be a great aid to, and I taught middle school math for 6 months. And then I got asked to teach middle school English for the next 2 years instead. But but instead of saying like, yes, we needed those kind of math tools, those kind of AI tools to help teachers. Melania Trump walked down the red carpet in the White House with a figure 2 robot next to her, saying like, this will be your child's teacher. This robot will be Play-Doh and instruct your child in everything you need to know.
Yeah.
And again, we just need to say, no, that's a bad idea. Children are not going to learn to love learning from a robot,
Right.
even if the robot could be more efficient and effective at it.
Yeah. Yeah. That goes right back to Proverbs 25, verses 2 and 3, where the scripture tells us that it is the glory of kings to search the thing out, but it's the glory of God to conceal a matter, not so that we don't find out what it is, but so that we delight in the discovery of the matter
Yeah.
that God himself has concealed, so that we can engage in the delight of that discovery. And when there's a teacher that actually teaches you something, having already discovered the delight of that, and then they conceal it enough for you to find it yourself, there's that thing that happens, that with the work itself, where you are the cause, being the cause of that learning, and you're interacting with human being, that just having this thing spit out an answer to you is just not there. I can't remember the name of the comedian. We got a couple of minutes here, but I was just thinking about it. I'm going to go really highbrow on the conversation now, and go to a stand-up comic. He's the guy who did the whole atheists believe in nothing and you return back to your maker. What's that guy's name? Pete Holmes. I think it was him. My son pointed this out. He said that the distance, this is a profound thing he said, the distance between not knowing something and then knowing that thing used to require effort to bridge.
Mm.
And now it requires
Yeah.
zero effort to bridge, which means that your cognitive state of the distance, there is no distance. You feel the same way in ignorance as you do informed. And so there's no you don't grow in the sense, because there's no difference. There's no distance between you not knowing it and you knowing it, because it didn't take any effort to get there. And I thought, for a number of things that I don't agree with Pete Holmes on, that was a pretty good one. And I thought I think that this whole idea of teaching being learned to hop by a robot will dehumanize and shrink the gap, but we won't actually retain anything, because we're going to rely on these machines to know everything for us anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then do we really know it if we can look it up and it gives us the answer? It's like it's momentarily in your head. But yeah, if it doesn't stick with you, I would say you don't actually know it.
Right.
There's a great line in one of the like dystopian novels. There's like a teenager with a brain implant. It was like, so if you ever want to look up like which battles Abraham Lincoln won in the Revolutionary War and stuff, you can just find out.
Yeah. That's great.
So
Yeah. And I could go on forever on some of this stuff, but it reminds me of my daughter got me into this dystopian young adult fiction series called Sives by Neil Shusterman, where it's
I know those books.
it's not a dystopian future, it's a utopian future where there's this thunderhead, which is this benevolent AI, which has got microphones and cameras everywhere. And it can do everything for us, but it allows us to do stuff so that we just don't, want to end our own lives because we feel useless. And I did wonder if Schusterman was having a commentary there on heaven. Like, what's the difference between heaven, where God is in control of everything and there's nothing that's going to decay, but here we are doing stuff, and this artificial world where we feel no sense of purpose because the AI does it for us. Doesn't that mean heaven will be essentially meaningless since we're not solving problems and these kind of things? I have a response to that, but as a moral theologian, I'm curious to know your response to that.
Yeah, honestly, so I just go to C.S. Lewis here, of course, is taking it from the Greek fathers of the church, where at the end of the last battle, heaven is not just like the static, you're sitting on a cloud, playing a harp, and just sitting there.
Yeah.
The heaven is further up and further in. That if God became man so that we might become like God, like there is a transformation of our nature. And this is where the transhumanists are like, they're rightly longing to, like both is like, yes, we appreciate the goodness of our nature, but also we are created to transcend it. We are created for union with God. And that brings in a new element to our capacity to grow, so that again, it's farther up and farther in, further up and further in. We're always capable of deepening our capacity to love and to know in relationship with each other and in relationship with God. And so I think the image of heaven as the kingdom of heaven, as opposed to simply a beatific vision. Jesus gives us that image of the kingdom that we take seriously. It's a city, it's a fortress. Yeah, there's the New Jerusalem, the city, but also the entire kingdom, a new heaven and a new earth that we can explore, that we can grow in, and that we can find increasing wisdom and wonder. We're not simply statically appreciating it.
Yeah. Well, that's a great place to
shout out to the Greek fathers. We've got Saint Irenaeus right here.
on the
So
on the
excellent.
coffee
Yeah.
cup.
The glory of God is man fully alive,
Mm-hmm.
and the life of
Amen.
man consists in beholding God.
Yeah.
Good
Your-
stuff.
Your buddy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's my buddy.
Yeah.
So,
That's terrific. Well, I think
yeah,
that's
that's awesome.
a great
Yeah.
place for us to conclude on that thought. I think it's really important for us to, I say this a lot, is that the biblical record is our eternal contemporary. It speaks from an ancient source that was written to different people in a different culture in a different time, yet it has a passport with many stamps, and it's also transtemporal in the sense that it speaks eternally contemporary to us. And so we would be wise to heed ancient wisdom on our contemporary issues. And that goes right back to man's desire to become God and to create things that are godlike, but also our desire to transcend, which can be redeemed if we put it in its proper context. So that's sort of my final thought on the whole thing. Dr. Boyd, thank you so much for the time, for a very thoughtful conversation. As we think of more questions, and we will, we might call on you again and just see what your thoughts are on this stuff. But it's been a really fun conversation. Thanks for giving us the time.
Thanks so much. And I would be delighted to, truly.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. And with that, I'll say it. The defense rests.
The defense rests.